Okay, I am super conflicted about how I feel about the Atomos Shinobi 2 monitor, this guy right here. On one hand, as soon as I bought it and started using it, I knew it would be one of my favorite new monitors for a number of reasons. But then on the other hand, it's kind of been a huge disappointment for one specific reason. So here's what I'm thinking. Let's talk about this monitor, what I like, what I didn't like, and then we'll obviously get into that one big disappointing thing. And then I also want to talk about a couple of other options that you might want to look into if you're interested in this monitor as well. So secure the cup and let's get into it. Okay, let's kick things off with the good stuff, the stuff that I liked about this monitor. It'll make me feel a little bit better when we get to the next part. So the first thing is the price. It's $350 US or $489 Canadian, which isn't necessarily a cheap monitor by any means, but it's also not a super expensive monitor in the grand scheme of the options that are out there. I also love how small it is. It's only 210 grams and it's super thin, so it really is easy to pack away into my backpack and kind of take wherever I need it. It does use the typical kind of Sony NPF battery on the back of it, or you can use an eliminator or whatever you want, but I have found that it does have great battery life. It doesn't seem to eat away at my batteries like some other monitors do. Oh, and if you want, there is a USB-C on the back that you can use to power the monitor as well. So if you're running something like a V-mount battery on your rig and you want to use that to power the monitor, you can go that way as well. It's a really bright monitor too. You're getting 1500 nits and it is 10-bit HDR as well. The user interface, the software that they have on the monitor is super easy to use, really user-friendly, which I really appreciate. A lot of monitors out there struggle in this category. Doing things like loading Luts onto this monitor was super easy and super intuitive using the SD card reader that they have on the side. Unfortunately, you can't use that for recording or anything like that, but I definitely appreciated how easy it was to load my Luts onto this monitor. It's got all the features that we would kind of expect from this class of monitor. So we've got things like focus peaking, zebras, we've got false colors, we've got histograms, we've got all sorts of different kind of waveform monitors as well. And we've got the ability to zoom in, do anamorphic de-squeeze. But here's the thing, here's where this monitor really stands out for me and for a lot of people, I think. You'll notice right now I've got it plugged into my Sony a7 IV and I've got two cables. One is an HDMI cable that's going to carry the signal from the camera, so it's going to be able to actually monitor on the monitor. And the other one is a USB-C cable, and that's also going into the USB-C of my a7 IV. Why do I have both plugged in? Well, that's because the Shinobi 2 can actually control the camera. So I can start and stop recording, I can adjust things like my white balance, my shutter speed, my aperture, and my ISO. Also, because of that USB-C connection, I can use this NPF battery to power not only the monitor itself, but also the camera. Okay, so there's some of the highlights of what I did like about the Shinobi 2, and here's what I didn't like as much. First of all, the turn on and off times are really bad. I'm gonna hit the power button, and the way that you turn it on is that there's this power button on the side and you push it in once and let go. Okay, ready? So I'm gonna push it in 3, 2, 1. And we're gonna just let this go in real time, see how long it takes for it to boot up. So we can see that there is a logo on the screen, and then now we're live. Another thing that is not my favorite about this is just the friggin' huge bezels, especially in the days when we have the phones that are basically bezel-less now, so we know the technology exists out there. The next thing is that there's only one attachment point. Again, this isn't a huge thing, but some monitors have attachment points on the sides, on the bottom, all over the place. This one just has the 1/4 20 thread on the bottom, and you can't attach it from anywhere else. And the ports are kind of limited. So we've got an HDMI in, but we don't have an HDMI out. We do have the ability to use the USB for connecting to the camera or to power the monitor via the USB, but there's only one USB, so you can't do both at the same time. So there's a quick overview, quick pros and cons of what I liked and what I didn't about the Shinobi 2, but here's the huge disappointment. Once we saw that this thing had camera control, everybody who heard about it or thought about it or saw it or used it all wanted to have tap focus. If you're gonna do all those things with the touch capabilities, it would be really nice to also have tap focus so that you didn't have to use the built-on monitor on your camera at all. There are some, like this Portkeys one that we'll talk about in a bit, that do have the ability to tap focus, or you can use your phone, so it's definitely doable. And here's where it gets extra conflicting. Atomos made a big announcement that they were bringing tap focus to this monitor. Then a week went by. Then another week went by, and it was just silence. We didn't know when it was coming. And then when it came, it didn't really work. Let me explain. So first and foremost, there are only a couple cameras that are currently supported with this firmware. I'm sure that's something that they'll update, but even right now, when I got the firmware update done, which was nice and easy to do, by the way, a big thumbs up for that, when I do plug it into my A7 IV, it does not work the way that I want it to. And unfortunately, this took me forever to figure out what was going on. I thought it just wasn't working at all, but it turns out that it's just kind of a little glitch. So for the A7 IV, once you get it connected, you'll see all the stuff on the bottom that I talked about before. We got record, white balance, shutter speed, aperture, ISO, and then in the top right corner, there's a little button that allows you to turn off the tap focusing for when you want to use the other functions of the monitor. And that was a great implementation of how to do that, I think. But when you go to tap focus, absolutely nothing happens. A little box pops up that goes away pretty quickly, but it's not actually making it focus anywhere. Now, I tried a number of things to try and figure out what was going on here. I thought, okay, well, maybe it won't work with tracking focus, which would be a huge disappointment in the first place, but let's try it without. So I moved over to single spot, and it still did absolutely nothing. And that's obviously still not the problem. So I turned it into manual focus, thinking, okay, well, maybe for some reason it needs to happen in manual focus. On the A7 IV, when you're in manual focus, you can still tap on things and it'll refocus and then it'll snap back into manual focus. So I thought maybe that's the case. Turn it into manual focus, still no luck. What I found out is that when I'm in wide focus mode, so it's looking at the entire screen and then I can do my focus tracking and all those kinds of things, it won't allow me to set the focus using the monitor. What I have to do is go into any kind of spot focus mode. Now, when I tap it, it can move that focus point. Here's the problem. That sets the focus point at a certain point within your frame. And then if you're moving the camera at all, or if that subject is moving, that doesn't help you. One of the best things about Sony cameras is their autofocus tracking. And this just has zero ability to do that. So it's a huge disappointment. Like I said, it's not really giving you tap focus. It's just allowing you to move your focus point, I guess, if that makes sense. Things work a little bit better with my Panasonic Lumix S5 Mark II X. It actually just allowed me to use the tap focus right away, but the tracking still doesn't work, and it still just sets a point wherever you want to set a point. It works better in more modes, but it's also got its own little problems as well. When a company tells you they're going to give you something and then it only kind of works like 20% of the way that it should work to be a fully functional feature, that's why it's so disappointing. On its own, as a monitor, it's still a really cool monitor, but that feature was the thing that I was missing, the thing that I wanted, and they said they were going to give it to me, and they kinda didn't. And the reason that I know this is possible is because I've got other devices that can kind of do this, that have their own pros and cons. So let's talk about a couple of those. Okay, so this is the LH7P from Portkeys, and it actually solves some of the problems that I have with the Shinobi 2. It's got places to mount on both sides as well as the bottom. It's got the kind of on-off switch that's literally just a switch, and it connects to the camera, Sony cameras specifically, as well as I think maybe some Blackmagic design cameras, but it connects to it via Wi-Fi, so it's wireless. You don't need that extra USB USB-C cable dangling, and that's both a pro and a con. And I say that because I definitely have had problems with this connecting, working well for a little while, and then just suddenly kind of not working with the camera anymore. The Wi-Fi connection with Sony cameras has never been the greatest. I don't necessarily think that that's the monitor's fault, but it is definitely a downside to working in that way. I wish that there was just a USB-C cable that I could plug in and use all those same functions. Once you do get it connected, you can use all of the normal tap focus features. Unfortunately, you can't see them on the monitor, so I can tap somewhere and it'll go focus there. And if I look down at my A7 IV screen, I can see that there is a tracking point staying on there. And if I move the camera around, it moves with that thing that I tapped on. So that's not a problem, but you just can't see it on the actual monitor itself. And it's a little bit convoluted to get to that point. Once you get it set up and once you know how it works, it does technically work the way that it's supposed to. It's just not as user-friendly as something like the Shinobi, and that's what I was hoping this would give me, was all the fixes to the problems that I had in the Portkeys. There is a third option that I also think is a great option for a lot of people. This little guy, this is a MagSafe adapter from Moment, just on a monitor stand. Take my phone, bam. I have a monitor on there. There's an app called Monitor and Control that is made by Sony, or there's the Creators app that also connects to Sony cameras. The one that I actually like to use is a third-party app called Monitor Plus, and you can connect it either wirelessly or, my personal favorite, if I'm going to be using it as an on-camera monitor like this, take that USB-C cable that I had before, slap it in the USB port on the side, and then it's automatically connected. I don't have to worry about those same kind of dropouts in the connection. And then when I'm choosing on the Monitor Plus app, I just make sure that I choose the one that says USB, and the connection is absolutely rock solid. There's a place in the menu for this app that you can change the tap function to tracking. And then when you tap, not only will you be able to tap and focus on whatever it is that you want to focus on, but you can actually see it on the screen in this case. And we've got all of the functions that we would want to have with any of the other monitors as well. The big downside to using your phone as a monitor is, one, either it's using up your iPhone or using up your phone, so you can't use your phone for other things while you're out and about. And two, technically, it's much more expensive than these other two monitors. I guess the other pro for the iPhone itself is that the battery is built in, so you don't have to worry about lugging around a bunch of these extra NPF style batteries. Okay, so I rambled for a long time and I want to kind of sum it all up here. So I've given you some options. So we've got the Shinobi 2, which unfortunately that firmware update was a little bit disappointing because it doesn't support enough cameras and it doesn't work well with the cameras that it does support. We've got the LH7P from Portkeys, which works for the most part, but isn't as user-friendly. I do think this is still a great option for a lot of people. It's a great kind of budget monitor, especially for a 7-inch monitor. It does a lot. It just kind of feels like a cheaper monitor. And then of course we've got using our phone as a monitor, which has its own pros and cons. I don't like to tie up my phone necessarily, but it is a great option for if you don't necessarily want to bring another monitor, you can just bring some kind of a mount for it and then it's there for you when you need it. Here's what I really hope is going to happen though. Sometime in the near future, Atomos is going to put out an update that fixes all these problems. This is a new product. The Shinobi 2 has only been out for a month or two, probably tops, and they're already putting out these firmware updates for us to try and impress us and trying to get more people to buy it. It is a great monitor, but if you're gonna give us those kinds of updates, make them work properly. So what I'm hoping is that in the next, I don't know, weeks, months, something like that, they're going to take this from being a good 5-inch monitor to being a good 5-inch monitor with all of the things that we were promised it would have. I don't know how realistic that is. I don't know what they are able to do or what they are limited by what the camera manufacturers allow, but the fact that I can do the touch focus properly with the Portkeys as well as with the phone itself using the USB connection, the same USB-C connection that this one uses, I feel like there has to be a way. Or I want someone to make a monitor that looks like this, basically that looks like a phone, that all that's on it is like the Monitor Plus app, and it just works like my phone does, but it doesn't cost 1,100 Canadian dollars or however much the phone was. I forget, and I try to forget because phones are expensive. Okay, rant over. I'll leave links to everything that I used here, including all the mounting options and stuff, down in the description. If you want to leave a question down in the comments, I'll try and get back to as many of you as I can. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.